Okay, great. Record this. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. We are, since the last two lectures, we are dealing with the valvular heart disease. And our last lecture, we covered mitral valve disease, both mitral regurgitation and mitral stenosis. We will fast last time, and today again we will be fast. We have to cover aortic valve disease, both the aortic valve stenosis and aortic valve regurgitation as well. So, first of all, we will start with the aortic stenosis, and in last our slides will cover aortic regurgitation. So, you know, the aortic wall is placed between the left ventricle and the aorta. The left ventricular blood is ejected through the aortic wall into the aorta and then systemic circulation. Anatomically, you know that this is a tricuspid wall having left coronary cusp and right coronary cusp and non-coronary cusp. These three are separated by commissures. So this is the commissure. The arrow is showing the commissure. So three commissures separating the three aortic wall cusps. So one wall is in the closed position, that's the diastole, and the three cusps are open in the figure below. During the systole, the wall three cusps are open. So the normal aortic wall typically resembles Mercedes-Benz sign. See, this is a monogram used by the Mercedes-Benz company. It's the most famous company for making cars. So the aortic wall anatomy resembles cusp and the commissure most closely resembles with the Mercedes-Benz. So usually we call this the Mercedes-Benz sign. You can see now compare that it's quite resembles with the normal aortic wall. So you can see in this picture that whenever there is a aortic wall stenosis or there's narrowing of the aortic wall, the aortic wall, if narrowed, then definitely the LV has to push pressure more than normal pressure to eject its blood through the aortic, to steno the aortic wall, the aorta and systemic circulation. So consequently, if it is long-standing stenosis and stenosis is not relieved, then definitely the left ventricular muscle gets hypertrophied. And whenever there is a left ventricular hypertrophy, increasing the left ventricular pressures, and this causes secondary changes into the left atrium, and the left atrium gets enlarged. So there are common causes of aortic stenosis. So regarding etiology, congenital and acquired, these are the most common causes of aortic wall disease. And among the acquired, again, the rheumatic disease, the rheumatic fever is the most common cause. And in the old ages, the calcification occurs in the old age, and this causes the degeneration in the aortic valve. So aortic valve gets stenosed. And some other rare causes can cause aortic stenosis. So you can have an infective endocarditis, and you can have some hyperlipidemia and some other connective tissue disorders and autoimmune disorders. SLE, rheumatoid involvement, and radiation sometimes can cause aortic stenosis. Agar disease of bone can result in aortic stenosis. And among the congenital causes, the bicuspid aortic wall is the common cause. Sometimes monocuspid wall can occur because we saw that there are three valves, uh, but sometimes there can be two cuspids, sometimes the valve can be unicuspid. So this is due to congenital abnormality. So from by birth, valve can be two cuspal valve and sometimes it can be unicuspid having only central orifice. You can see in this figure, here is the tricuspid valve. You can see here is the monocuspal valve. You can see only one cusp over here, second cusp over here. So bicuspid valve, this is the three cusps of the aortic valve, but these are the thick and stenosis valve resulting from the rheumatic fever. So this is the three cusp, here the two cusp, and here the uterine cusp. This is now three cusp aortic valve. So this is the most informative slide. You can see what happens in case of aortic stenosis. The aortic valve gets stenosed, then definitely you have obstruction to the flow of the blood from the left ventricle to the aorta because there is obstruction placed by the aortic valve. So stenosis really can be subvalvular, can be supravalvular, but most commonly we will focus on the part of the stenosis that is caused by the valvular valve itself. So we are talking about the valvular aortic stenosis. So whenever there is stenosis of the valve, what happens that there is obstruction to the flow, and definitely the LV has to use more pressure. So increase LV pressure. Whenever the LV long extendingly works on high pressure levels there, so it gets hypertrophy, and definitely there will be in the increase in the mass of the left ventricle. And whenever there is obstruction of the flow, definitely the ventricle takes more time for ejection, so there will be increase in the left ventricular ejection time, and definitely there will be increase in the LV diastolic pressure, and the aortic pressure definitely will be decreased because the below the valve, from the aortic valve below to the ventricle, there will be increased pressure in the aorta definitely because the valve is near its nose, so the aortic pressure itself will be low. So these mechanisms will lead into the increased LV mass and the LV dysfunction. Increased aortic pressure will definitely increase the demand of the oxygen consumption, and this ultimately will cause myocardial ischemia and ultimately it will failure. Likewise, whenever there is an increase in the diastolic pressures and decrease in the aortic pressure, again this will contribute to already highly demand ventricle. There will be less supply to the ventricles, and so the myocardium gets ischemia. So all these mechanisms finally will result in LV failure if there is no treatment. If it is left untreated, aortic valve, the LV ultimately fails due to all these mechanisms, due to diastolic dysfunction, due to increased myocardial oxygen consumption, due to decreased myocardial supply. So these all will contribute to the ultimately the left ventricular systolic failure. So what happens whenever patient has got aortic stenosis? So then patient can present with the angina pectoris, he will experience chest pain, and sometimes patient can have exertional syncope. Patient can have syncope. Patient can have a shortness of breath, apnea, dyspnea, and sometimes patient can present with full sign and symptoms of heart failure. So this is the natural history of the aortic stenosis. You see that there is a very long period of asymptomatic patients. And when patients become symptomatic, whether it's angina, syncope, or heart failure, then there is an abrupt decrease in the survival of these patients. You can see in the graph. When symptoms appear, then the survival graph suddenly goes down. And the patients who present with the angina, or the patient who present with the syncope, or the patient who present with the heart failure. These three patients have got different survival rate. You can see in this figure that patient who develops angina, their 5 year survival rate. You can see they have got 5 year survival rate, and those patients who present with the syncope, they have, after presentation, they have got a survival rate of 3 years, and those patients who present with the angina, heart failure is 2 years, syncope is 3 years, and angina is 5 years. So the patients who only present with the angina, they have got better survival rate as compared to those patients who present with the failure. So for many failure patients who present initially with the failure, they've got low survival rate, that is 2 years after diagnosis, and those patients second followed by the those patients who present with the syncope, and last those patients who are present with the angina, they have got survival rate, have a survival rate of 5 years. So this is the typical natural history of aortic valve stenosis symptomatology. And what findings you can, if you examine these patients, what findings you can see in these patients. So if you examine these patients, and you will find the pulse. And the typical pulse of aortic stenosis is known as the pulsus parvus retardus. This is name given to a slow rising pulse of aortic stenosis. Sometimes you can have a thrill palpable even on the carotids, and upper speed is usually heaving and sustained in type. Sometimes on pericardial examination, you can have a systolic thrill. You can palpate with your palm of the hand. And when you auscultate this patient regarding heart sounds, you will get normal S1, and regarding S2, you will find that the aortic component of the second heart sound is soft. And whenever there is left ventricular hypertrophy, then you can find S4 as well, and you can sound listen ejection click in these patients, and definitely, and you can hear ejection systolic murmur in these patients. So this typical murmur is known as is the ejection systolic murmur that is best heard at the left upper sternum that radiates into the neck into on the carotid arteries. Sometimes you can palpate the thrill, and ejection click can be hard in these patients. So these are the findings that you can see in patients who have got aortic stenosis. And when you go for the investigations, the most early investigation you perform is the chest X-ray and the ECG, and definitely the echocardiography will tell us the above the details of the aortic stenosis, details of the aortic anatomy, valve anatomy, and the you can categorize the patient with whether this patient has got uh, severe aortic stenosis, moderate aortic stenosis, or mild aortic stenosis. Means you've got different Doppler echocardiographic methods by which you can separate patients of aortic stenosis in especially in these categories, mild, moderate, and severe. Sometimes cardiac cath is important investigations, and sometimes left catheterization is done, coronary angiography is done to see whether these coronary arteries are normal or not. So angiography can be performed in a selected population of these patients. And MRI is again developing the imaging test that can tell you the left ventricular volumes, function, mass, and again by even MRI you can quantify between the grades of severity of aortic stenosis. But the commonest test you perform during your wards and your clinics is the X-ray chest and the ECG that is readily available, and echo again is readily available everywhere in a cardiology unit, so you can perform echocardiographic test as well. So if you find chest X-ray of a patient with aortic stenosis, normally you cannot see left ventricular hypertrophy on the chest X-ray, but sometimes it is enlarged. You can have a enlarged left atrial shadow, or you can have an enlarged heart, increase cardiothoracic ratio on the chest X-ray film. And definitely, if you perform the ECG, you will get the signs of left ventricular hypertrophy. You can see over here that there is a in V5, V6, you can see the largest R wave in the V5, and there is also a depression in TBMN. This is typical known as the left ventricular hypertrophy of strand pattern. So LVH is of two types. One is the left ventricular hypertrophy of increased amplitude, and second type of left ventricular hypertrophy is the left ventricular type of volume overload. There is only amplitude is increased, there is no strain. So this is the typical sign of the strain when there is a depression after the R wave. So this is the left ventricular hypertrophy strain pattern. So this is the ECG pattern you see whenever there is a left ventricular hypertrophy, and whether it can be due to hypertension or it can be due to aortic stenosis. So the strain you can find whenever there is a pressure low type of left ventricular hypertrophy, you will get this ECG. So this is the typical of aortic stenosis. And definitely, I told you that echocardiography is the final test that will establish the diagnosis, and that will help you in categorizing the patient in mild, moderate, and severe. So by echocardiography, you can divide the patient and then you plan your management. So echocardiography is a very helpful test. This is the test that the transthoracic cardiography that is you can perform on the bedside in the cardiography room. And this is the echocardiography in that picture. This is a picture taken through passing a probe into the esophagus that I discussed when I was teaching you the different investigations which are used in cases of cardiovascular diseases. So this is the transesophageal echocardiography. So this picture is the echo taken from the transesophageal echocardiography, and this by from this you can actually delineate the structure more closely and very clearly. You can see the non-coronary cusp over here. You can see the left coronary cusp over here. You can see the right coronary cusp over here. So these are the methods by which you can evaluate the aortic valve anatomy. And this is the Doppler cardiography signals by which you can, by applying different methods and modes of cardiography, you can calculate whether this patient has got mild, moderate, or severe. In this picture, you can see this envelope is being measured. So this envelope develops in a patient who develops aortic stenosis, and the signal above here, this is a signal that occurs in a patient who has got both aortic stenosis and aortic regurgitation. So the signal that is formed, this envelope is formed above the central line. This is for the aortic regurgitation. And the signal over here, this is the typical of aortic stenosis. So by calculating different methods, there are different methods for calculation of the severity of echocardiography for the measurement of aortic wall stenosis. So you can categorize patient whether this has got mild aortic stenosis or this patient has got moderate or severe aortic stenosis. So both the average velocities and the aortic wall areas and other methods are used for quantifying the aortic stenosis. This we teach actually in postgraduate classes where it's mandatory for postgraduate students for after final year. We just you giving the knowledge that these are the method by which you can calculate the severity of the aortic stenosis. So if you find a patient who has got aortic stenosis, now you diagnose by doing ECGs, chest X-rays, and echocardiography. You label this patient as got severe aortic stenosis, then definitely you have to treat this patient. So uh, you see that valvular disease is the most common cause in our country. So definitely the valvular disease, the most common cause. We in our previous talk, we noticed that the most common cause for the valvular disease is the recurrent rheumatoid arthritis that results in the valvular stenosis. So definitely a patient who has got etiology of rheumatoid heart fever, so these patients will definitely need antibiotic prophylaxis for recurrent rheumatoid. And apart from that, uh, this patient develops arrhythmia, then you have to prevent or control different arrhythmias. And these patients, especially those who have got moderate to severe aortic stenosis, you should restrict their activities. So these patients should not be involved in competitive sports, and they should not be involved in heavy work or exertional work. So this is a very important patient with the moderate to severe or severe aortic stenosis. And other medications used for the treatment of actually there is no specific treatment of aortic stenosis, but sometimes when patient present with the heart failure, then some drugs can be helpful, like diuretics can be used in patient who develop full symptoms of cardiac failure, and sometimes arteriodilators are used, but they are very much cautiously used. Otherwise, they can drop patient's blood pressure and can have a very catastrophic results. So, practically for practical reasons, you see, the aortic stenosis, there is no medical treatment. Whatever once you should restrict the patient's activities, then you have to prevent his further damage or by putting patient on the antibiotic prophylaxis, and definitely then patient needs to be a candidate for the opening of the valve, and medically you cannot open the valve. So there is limited drugs that can help in the medical management of these patients, but actual treatment for these patients is when you want to these patients to get rid of stenosis. Otherwise, if stenosis is there, there is no specific treatment, and medical treatment drugs will be of little use in patient with the aortic stenosis. So the options for a patient who has aortic valve stenosis, how the valve can be opened. So we have the balloon aortic valvuloplasty. This is the one option by which we can open the aortic valve. And the latest and new procedure that can be performed percutaneously, that is the TAVI. This is a procedure, very emerging new technology. Few valve have been replaced in even Pakistan. So this program is now developing here in Pakistan and has developed and established in different countries like Europe and United States and other developed countries of the world. So you can percutaneously replace the aortic valve. This procedure is known as the TAVI. And those patients uh, who are candidates for the surgery, definitely the aortic valve replacement is the choice for these patients. So there are different indications for the balloon aortic valvoplasty and for TAVI and for aortic valve replacement. But the severe patients who have severe symptoms, the valvoplasty and the aortic valve replacement is the actually choice of treatment for these patients. So you can see in this figure the aortic valve is being opened. So this procedure actually helps for a time being. Otherwise, this again that procedures are not actually the final treatment of choice for a patient who has got severe aortic stenosis. But for time being, this can help, especially in the young children. And this procedure can be. Otherwise, in old age patients, this procedure actually the not a choice for a patient who has got severe aortic stenosis because the wall is calcified and it's very difficult to be opened by the balloon only. And surgery, that surgery is the final option in patient who got severe aortic stenosis that cannot be managed by the valvuloplasty, and TAVI is an option, not an option for this patient. So surgery is a definite option, and you can replace the valve. So valve can be replaced. You can have a metal valve. You can have a bioprosthetic valves that can be replaced. And sometimes in a patient who has got disease, aorta itself, then the valve itself along with the aorta is also used. But this occurs whenever there is a combined stenosis of the aortic valve and aortic regurgitation. Otherwise, in pure aortic stenosis, there is no replacement of the aortic root, but only valve is replaced. So you have got different prosthetic materials. One is the metallic and is the bioprosthesis available, and you can replace the valve with these surgical procedures. And this is the actually the TAVI procedure where you can put a wall across the native wall, disease native wall, and you can inflate the balloon that is mounted over the wall, and then you pull up the balloon back, and the metal wall, the aortic wall remains over there and functions in place of normal aortic valve. So this is the actually percutaneous method by which you can simply place a valve between the atria and between the ventricle and the aorta. So this is the percutaneous method of replacing the aortic valve. So this is the TAVI procedure is being done in this figure you can see. So this was actually the management of a patient who suffered from the aortic valve stenosis. And now we'll come to the aortic regurgitation because valve can be stenosed or aortic valve can be regurgitated. So both have different pathophysiology. In the case of aortic stenosis, you see there was stenosis of the valve and there was impedance of the blood flow from the left ventricle towards the aorta. But here, what happens that during the diastole, the blood that is ejected into the aorta through aortic valve due to abnormality of the aortic valve or abnormality of the aortic root, the regurgitant, the volume that has gone into the aorta regurgitates back into the LV and usually produce a volume overlocation. So in next few slides we will cover the aortic regurgitation. You see the pathophysiology is a very important slide, like we shared with you of aortic stenosis, but here you could see this is the pathophysiology of the aortic regurgitation. You see in the aortic stenosis there was actually pressure problems, and you can see here are the initial volume problems. You can see there's diastolic regurgitation that will increase the left ventricular volume definitely, and the increase the stroke volume, and the aortic diastolic pressure will decrease, and actually the effective stroke volume it is decreased, and this will lead again to the decreased myocardial supply, and the increased volume of the LV definitely will increase the LV mass, and this will all result in the LV dysfunction and myocardial consumption. Again, this will develop the increase in left ventricular diastolic pressures. Both these combined with the decreased oxygen supply again lead to myocardial ischemia, and all these mechanisms finally sum up over here, and the patient will develop again the full signs of LV failure. So the end result of aortic stenosis is the LV failure, and aortic regurgitation is the LV failure. But here the things started with the volume load type of conditions, and in aortic stenosis, you have seen that the things started with the pressure over. So actually, the aortic regurgitation again, this is there are two types of aortic regurgitation. One is the acute aortic regurgitation, and other is the chronic aortic regurgitation. So these are actually the acute aortic regurgitation and chronic aortic regurgitation. These are actually two distinct diseases. So this and both the acute and chronic have got separate etiology. They have got separate pathophysiology. They've got separate presentation, and definitely these are two distinct diseases having separate etiology, pathophysiology, and presentation. So definitely they will be managed separately. So for the acute aortic regurgitation, the management is separate, and for the patient who have chronic aortic regurgitation, the management is different. If you see, I have divided this slide in two halves. You see, there is etiology of aortic regurgitation is being discussed in this slide, and you have got leaflet abnormalities, and you have got aortic root abnormalities. These abnormalities will lead to chronic aortic regurgitation. And among the list of leaflet abnormalities, you have got rheumatic fever on the top, and infective endocarditis, trauma, congenital heart diseases, and congenital causes, and autoimmune causes, and connective tissue disorders like systemic lupus erythematosus, rheumatoid arthritis. Sometimes some drugs can contribute in the damage of the aortic valves, and Takayasu arthritis again is one of the cause of damaging the leaflets of the aortic valve. And among the aortic root abnormalities, we have got age-related aortic dilatation, and long-standing untreated hypertension is again the cause of aortic root abnormalities. And sometimes in patients who have got aortitis, then these develop dilatation of the aorta, psoriatic arthritis, Marfan syndrome, and other collagen disorders that can lead to dilatation of the aortic root. So you can separate the etiology of the chronic AR and the leaflet abnormalities, etiology related to leaflet abnormalities, and etiology related to aortic root abnormalities. But in all these, the leaflet abnormalities are most common, and among the leaflet abnormalities, the rheumatic fever is again the most common cause of aortic regurgitation. And as far as the acute AR is concerned, again, I have divided the causes of acute AR in the aortic root abnormalities and leaflet abnormalities. And you can see among the patients who have got leaflet abnormalities, there is a traumatic rupture and acute infective endocarditis, acute prosthetic valve dysfunction. If patient has got previously undergone aortic valve replacement with the prosthetic heart valve, then this will dysfunction and present with the acute regurgitation. And sometimes if one has attempted aortic balloon valvoplasty for treating a patient with severe aortic stenosis, then as a complications of the opening of the stenosis, you can get a balloon regurgitation of the AR during the procedure of aortic balloon valvoplasty. And among the aortic root abnormalities, again, you have got acute aortic dissection is the very common cause of aortic regurgitation. And sometimes peripheral leak or dehiscence of the posterior valve occurs. And this is again most commonly occur in those patients who are suffering from the infective endocarditis. So in case of acute AR, so these are the most common causes of the acute regurgitation. So in our part of the world, you can the most common again you will find those patients who have got infective endocarditis and followed by the dysfunction of the some prosthetic valve in a patient who have got already prosthetic valve in place. So the both the patients who have got chronic AR and the patients who have got acute AR both have got different presentations, different signs and symptoms. So we'll discuss them separately. So in case of chronic AR, usually the signs develop according to the etiology. So then gradual onset of symptoms occurs in cases with the chronic AR. So if you examine these patients for signs of aortic regurgitation, and the pulse, you will find there is a wide pulse pressure, and you can have a raised systolic blood pressure. And on the precordial examination, you have a pulsatile precordium, and the apex beat in case of aortic stenosis was sustained heaving, but here you can see there is a diffuse and hyperdynamic pulse which is displaced laterally and inferiorly. So you have got displaced hyperdynamic apex beat. If you want to auscultate this patient for having signs of AR, you can find soft S1 and a soft S2. Sometimes this one can be normal, but you definitely the aortic component of the aortic wall is soft in case of aortic regurgitation, and due to volume movement conditions of the LV, you can have a S3, LVS3, and definitely the regurgitated flow from the aorta into the ventricle produce diastolic murmur, and sometimes this diastolic flow that strikes over the anterior mitral plate can produce Austin murmur, and sometimes due to large volume that is crossing with each systole into the aorta, this will behave like a functional stenosis of the aortic wall, and you can have a systolic murmur in case of severe aortic regurgitation. So these are the findings that can be seen in patients who have got chronic severe aortic regurgitation. I repeat, so you can find normal or soft S1, you can have a soft or S and S2, you can have S3 Galen, you can have a diastolic murmur, you can have a systolic murmur, and you can have Austin field murmur. These are the auscultative findings of the aortic regurgitation present in those patients who have got chronic aortic regurgitation. So there are a lot of other signs in patients with the chronic AR. Most some people can call them as a peripheral signs of the aortic regurgitation, or sometimes you can see people will be calling the specific signs of other specific signs of aortic regurgitation. So here is the list of these signs. These are very commonly seen in the books and commonly asked during the examinations. So the first sign is the demersal signs. So there is in demersal signs that there is nodding of the head with each heartbeat. If you see a patient with the severe aortic regurgitation, his whole head and neck will be moving with each heartbeat. So this is known as the demersal signs. And Corrigan's pulse is the abrupt distension and the quick collapse of the pulse. And this is also known as a collapsing pulse, or this is also known as the water hammer pulse of a patient who has got severe aortic regurgitation. And bispherians pulse again, it occurs when there is a combination of the aortic stenosis and aortic regurgitation. So you have got a slow rising and abrupt fall in the pulse in a patient who has got combined aortic stenosis and aortic regurgitation. And fourth sign is the Trabe's sign. That is the actually very loud booming systolic and diastolic signs heard over the femoral artery. And sometimes Trabe's signs also written in books like pistol shot sounds you can hear and by putting your stethoscope on the femoral artery. So this is the Trabe's sign. Muller sign is actually the pulsations of the uvula. If you open up the patient's mouth and see at the pulsation of the uvula, so pulsator uvula is known as the Muller sign. And here sign is the disease sign. Uh, Actually, this is the sign that is hard on the femoral artery. If you press femoral artery and you listen with the stethoscope, and there's a systolic sound, then you call that this is the systolic murmur. If you press the artery distal part, and you can see there's a diastolic sound, that is the diastolic murmur. So when this is just method of examining the femoral artery. So if you proximally compress the femoral artery, you will see a systolic sound, and if you see press the femoral artery distally, and then you will hear a diastolic sound, and that is the diastolic murmur. So this is a combination of both systolic and diastolic murmurs while putting the pressure on the proximal distal femoral artery, and you are hearing with the stethoscope. And this sign is known as the Rayleigh signs. Another sign is the Quincke sign, and this can be seen by pressing a glass slide on patient's lip, or you transmit a light through a patient's fingertips, or sometimes even you can press the nail of the patient. You see there will be demarcation of the pulp, the red pulp and the white pulp after pressing over the nail of the patient. And you will see the demarcation line will be pulsatile. So this is known as the Quincke sign. And another sign is the Hale sign. Actually, this is not the pulse or anything you can palpate over the artery, but this is actually the pressure taken from the lower limb. If you take the popliteal pressure, if you take the brachial pressure, so if you compare both the brachial pressure with your BP apparatus, if you take a pressure from the patient's from the popliteal artery, and the pressure in the popliteal artery, if it exceeds more than the brachial pressure of more than 60 mercury, millimeter of mercury, then we could label this patient as a positive Hale sign. So there is normally low increased blood pressure in the pupillary artery than the brachial artery or radial artery. But whenever it exceeds more than 60 millimeter of mercury, then you can label this patient have got a positive Hale sign. So again, this is one of the sign of patients having severe aortic agitation. So these were the actually different signs that can be seen in patient with the aortic stenosis. So I repeat this, The other sign, one is the Demoiselle sign, one is the Corrigan pulse, Westphalian pulse, Trabi sign, Muller sign, the resist sign, Schwenke sign, Hill sign. You can call these are the specific signs of aortic regurgitation, or you can label these are the peripheral signs of the severe aortic regurgitation. But in case of a patient who present with the acute AR, the scenario is different. The patient will actually present suddenly, and patient may have got normal blood pressure or hypertension. Patient will have tachycardia, and pulse pressure can be normal or slightly increased. There will be no peripheral signs of chronic AR. What we discussed just two slides back, that there are some peripheral signs of chronic AR, but here there will be no peripheral signs of AR. Even apex speed is not shifted because acute AR is developed suddenly, and chronic AR develops gradually, in which heart will have time to become enlarged and hypertrophied and displaced. But in case of acute aortic regurgitation, the LVA has no time for hypertrophy and enlargement. So definitely, you find apex speed that can be in a normal position, and but the JVP will be less. Sometimes you can have a peripheral pericardial and pleural effusion, and S1 and S3 may be audible. All the murmurs that we discuss, systolic, diastolic, these are actually uh, very difficult to hear in the patient with the acute aortic regurgitation, because usually the pressure in the left atrium rises so suddenly, patient develops pulmonary edema, there will be a lot of findings, crackles in the chest. So it's very difficult for the physicians to pick up the systolic and diastolic numbers during the auscultation of the precordium. So you can have chest cramps. And sometimes if patient develops pericardial effusion, then definitely the signs of pericardial effusion can be there, like raised JVP and muffled sound can be seen in patient with the who complicate with the pericardial effusion as well. So you see here there is no list of such findings in patient with the acute AR, like we have seen in patient with the chronic aortic regurgitation. So if you see a patient who has got aortic agitation, the chest X-ray, the heart shadow will be large in patient with the chronic AR, and in acute AR you can have a normal heart shadow and signs of pulmonary edema. An electrocardiogram performed in patient who have got chronic AR will have a signs of left ventricular hypertrophy. But you see here the difference between the previous left ventricular hypertrophy, where you saw that there is after a large R wave in lead 5, and there's ST depressions and T wave inversions in the lateral leads. But here you can see there is a large amplitude of the R wave, but there is no ST depression or T wave changes. So it means that here there is a increased left ventricular amplitude, but there is no strain. So this type of left ventricular hypertrophy is seen in those patients who have got increased left ventricular volumes. So there are two types of left ventricular hypertrophy from ECG point of view. One is the left ventricular hypertrophy of pressure overload type, where you can see the LV strain pattern, ST depression, and TVNVM. Another type of left ventricular hypertrophy is the uh, volume overload type of left ventricular hypertrophy, where you do not find the left ventricular strain and T wave changes, but you have got only increase in the amplitude of the R wave in the lateral lead of the patient. So this is the typical ECG in patient who have got chronic aortic regurgitation. And second test is the echocardiography, and definitely like aortic stenosis, echocardiography is again very helpful test that will see at the anatomy of the aortic wall and the aortic root, whether only valve is involved or aortic root is involved. You can measure the aortic root dimensions. You can quantify the aortic regurgitation, whether again this aortic regurgitation is mild, moderate, or severe. So echocardiography will help in categorizing these patients, separating these patients of mild disease from the moderate and severe, and then you plan for the treatment of the patient. So echography again is very much helpful in making the diagnosis and plan for the management of the patient, and even with separating whether this patient has got acute AR or patient has got chronic AR. Again, cardiac catheterization is helpful in certain set of the patients where you suspect some coronary artery disease along with the aortic valve itself. And MRI is again very important test, especially in those patients who have got coronary involvement, or in those patients who have got aorta itself, ascending aortic involvement, for the measurement of different segments of the aorta, ascending aorta, coronary sinuses, and diameter of the different segments of the aorta, whether what is the diameter of aorta at the level of the coronary sinuses, at the level of aortic arch, whether there's any aneurysm or not, whether there is any dissection or not. So there are so many reasons for performing MRI and for the planning of the patient who are candidates for the intervention. So nowadays the MRI is being increasing to use, especially in these group of the patient who have got aortic valve along with the aortic root abnormalities. So these are the different figures I have put in this slide by which the echocardiography will help you in making the diagnosis. You can see here there is vibration of anterior leaf and echocardiography. The blood jet strikes over the anterior flap, and you can see this finding filtering of the anterior flap. And you can definitely on the 2D echocardiography you can see there's a non-competition of the both leaf plates of the aorta, and there's a gap between the during system diastole between the both leaf plates. From here, you can have a regurgitant blood from the aorta into the left ventricle. You can see the regurgitation of the blood in this picture from the aorta into the left ventricle again. This is again figure in which you can see the regurgitant jet going from the aorta into the left ventricular cavity. So this is the figure taken from the transthoracic echocardiography, and this is the figure that is taken from the transesophageal echocardiography. And this is the M-mode echocardiography. Here you can see again one of the picture of transesophageal echocardiography. You can see the blood is regurgitant. Blood is coming from the aorta inside the left ventricle. Here again you can see the transthoracic echocardiography. You can see the blood is striking on the directly on the anterior mitral flap. So this is the Doppler method which is used for quantifying the aortic regurgitation. So this is the typical envelope formed in a patient who has got severe aortic regurgitation, and by different methods of Doppler echocardiography, you can quantify whether this patient has got mild, moderate, or severe disease. So these are again the different color echocardiography showing the different regurgitation of the aortic valve. Again, this echocardiographic picture, you can see the jet flowing from the aorta into the ventricle. This is the just we discussed the fluttering of the anterior flap. So likewise, in a patient with the severe aortic regurgitation and severe aortic stenosis, you have got a choice of having a replacement of the aortic valve. So here, in case of aortic regurgitation, there is some choice for medical treatment. You can again prescribe some diuretics and vasodilators in these patients who have got mild to moderate to severe disease, and Moderate for mild disease, you have to follow the patient, and for moderate disease, you can put patient on some medical management. One is the prophylaxis, again for the rheumatic fever, and definitely patient who got congestive phase, then you prescribe the diuretics and in patients, these patients who have got severe aortic agitation, you can put patient on the vasodilator therapy as well. But definitely, definite treatment for patient who have got the severe aortic agitation or symptomatic, even on medical treatment, then you go for the surgical treatment. Here, there is no choice of intervention, percutaneous method, but only surgery is the choice in patient with the symptom who are symptomatic and we got severe aortic agitations. So again, you have got a choice of metallic valve replacement, and second is the bioprocesses replacement at the position of the aortic valve. And in those patients who have got disease of the aorta alongside with the disease of the aortic valve, so you have got the replacement of both the valve as well as the some part of the aortic valve, aort- aortic itself, aorta itself. So some part of the aorta, but there are some prosthetic material by which the valve and the initial part of the aorta is already formed by uh, technological methods, and you replace the aortic wall along the root of the aorta. So, and then this got anastomosed with the normal natural aorta. So these are the two methods by which you can replace the valve. One is the only valve, one is the aortic valve with the root replacement. And for the most commonly used method is the actually and most commonly disease the actually the valvular, and definitely the aortic root problems are rare, and commonly the aortic valve is replaced usually by the metal valve and sometimes in some patients for the by prosthetic valves. So this is the actually definite treatment for the severe aortic agitation. I close here and thank you all. And if you have got any question, you can ask question. You have got 4 minutes. You can put any question. You got any question? You can open up your mic and you can put a question. You can open up your mic and you can put a question if you got any question. I cannot listen to you. I do not have any question from your side. Can you hear me? If you do not have any question, then I am going to stop over here, and I will tell you that from